You see me, you see him, my best friend. He hold me down like ankles fighting the waves. Apply not to my crime, yeah, I do time. Till I'm with you, I'll be counting the days. Yeah, ooh, been through so many things, but we always get through. Yeah, ooh, it ain't always perfect, but it's worth it. This is deeper than the surface. If I said I didn't love you, you and I know I've been frontin'. Wiped all my scars away like it was nothing. Took the parts of me I tried to hide and make them something, something. Like it was nothing. Ooh, something about you, baby. Ooh, you know you drive me crazy. Ooh, you give me peace of mind. Ooh, let me tell you why. You make it easy. Say, to take it easy. Say, feel so weak. Say, easy to love. Say, to take it easy. Say, feel so weak. Say, easy to love. I never thought that I would give it to you, but now I don't think it's the time. I won't do it. I think it's cause the way you talk to me. Know how to say it without making me feel little. You're gracious even when you pop off on me. When you get done, I got a little something to drop off on you. Because you earned it with the time you took to put it that way. You got me liking to get put in my place. If I said I didn't love you, you and I know I've been frontin'. Wiped all my scars away like it was nothing. Took the parts of me I tried to hide and make them something, something. Like it was nothing. Ooh, something about you, baby. Ooh, you know you drive me crazy. Ooh, you give me peace of mind. Ooh, let me tell you why. You make it easy. Say, to take it easy. Say, feel so easy. Say, easy to love. Easy to you make it easy. Say, to take it easy. Say, feel so weak. Say, easy to love. You make it easy. You make it easy.
The Maze Jackson Show. We'll be back after this break.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, and I think of all the things what you're doing, and in my head I paint a picture. Since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. But won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Did you have to go to jail? Put your house on up for sale? Did you get a good lawyer? I hope you didn't catch a tan. I hope you find the right man who'll fix it for you. And are you shopping anywhere? Change the color of your hair. Are you busy? And did you have to pay this fine that you've been dodging all the time? Are you still dizzy? Oh, yeah. Since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Oh, stop making a fool out of me. WIFTBPM.
Live from What's in It for the Black Media Studio.
The problem in the past has been the man turning us against one another.
Take a journey with Salim.
Come with me into Muwakkil'S world.
We have been unable to see the truth because we have been fighting for 10 square feet of ground.
It's Muwakkil'S world.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Here's Salim.
Greetings, family. I am Salim Muwakkil, and I welcome you to Muwakkil'S world on this Tuesday, the 27th. Man, it's amazing. 27th day of July. And in this ongoing summer, we have a string of hot days. We've been spared some of the searing heat that the West and East Coast both have experienced.
Chicago has been so lucky.
We have been so far.
Yeah.
I guess we should knock on wood, right? That's what one does. Well, today we're going to do some retrospecting, I guess is the way to put it. Me and my producer, Emma Young, will be taking a Gumpian journey through Muwakkil'S world, charting the Black Power trajectory that I took through the so-called baby boomer era, that era that was really the Black Power era. It was the birth of the Black Power era, the birth of the Summer of Love era, the hippie era, psychedelic, all that stuff was generated during this period of history, a very formative period of history for this country, especially for the black community. And this is a very tumultuous period. The Black Panther Party, cultural nationalism, the rise of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King at the same time, all of these dissecting and intersecting ideologies and theologies were merging during this period.
Right.
It was a really vibrant period of activism. And this was, this is a period that I came of age in and really experienced a lot of these, I dipped my toes into a lot of these trends and in fact swam in some of them as well, in some of these currents. So
how did you choose?
I want people to stay tuned and listen in to this journey, a little historical journey that we're trying to connect the dots to the future. Really, is what this is all about, and it's a future that it's a future that looks increasingly imperiled as we enter this new period. There's a whole lot of antagonism out there that's building up. It's kind of the counter Reconstruction period that we find ourselves in. So anyway, with Sister Emma and me, we're going to kind of go through some of that stuff and try to illuminate what's going on right now, by that past. And because really, there's the best way to profit from that past is to consider it in its relationship to the present and to the future. I mean, otherwise, it's just something to talk about. We got to try to apply some of those lessons, and some of those lessons that I've learned really inform my views today, and those lessons I think need to be shared with a lot of folks. So here we are.
Right.
How you doing?
I'm good. What I was thinking about, so here you are coming out of Rutgers, which is not an HBCU kind of college. It's almost like, wasn't very many black folks at Rutgers when you were there, was it? It was kind of an elite.
Well, it was in the period of transformation. This was, in fact, I was a part of a group that occupied the dean's office. This was that time when a lot of students were doing that to demand open enrollment, to demand more enrollment of African American students and opening of the curriculum to put black people on the stage of civilization. from where we had been absent in much of contemporary scholarship. So all of this merged at the same time. You know, there was this, and a lot of this can be traced really back to Malcolm. Malcolm was the one who initiated this quest for Afro-centered scholarship, for some challenge to the Western hegemony, some challenge to the Western system of knowledge. And the black movement took that in various directions. One of those directions was academic, and there was the quest for black studies and demanding that black students be enrolled in all of these in many of these schools, especially the elite schools.
Okay.
So yeah, it was in a period of transition. I had just come out of the service, and so I was a little bit older than the traditional freshman, and in fact, at the same time, I was a member of the Black Panther Party. So so I was a unique student in a lot of ways. And also, my tuition was being paid by the government because of my service, because I spent time in the service. So Rutgers was in a period of transition, like a lot of schools at that period.
And then going back to the service, is that what kind of informed your, militant stance when you got into the service? And saw how racist, I guess not that the service was all that, well, they were too, but you were stationed in the South, right?
Yeah.
And coming from New York, that had to be kind of a...
Yeah, well, the military, the U.S. military has a Southern bias to it. I don't know exactly how to explain that, but all of most of the training instructors are from the South. Or they have Southern elocution. They talk with a Southern kind of emphasis. The service is very macho, and the macho aspect of American identity is really, the Confederate, the Southern, the rebel, that kind of thing. And so the service really had a Southern bias, and I noticed that from the get-go. Although it didn't really affect us, because when I came into the Air Force. It was a period of transition. The Air Force was changing from its previous regime of basic training to another regime, and there were more brothers coming in. The Air Force has really never been that heavy on African American participation, but during the period I came in, a lot of brothers were coming in, and we controlled, the drill teams in basic training. All of the drill masters and the front guards and whatnot were all African American. The best drill teams were primarily led and dominated by African Americans. So you can see, the black influence in the military, although it had this kind of Southern bias. When I was stationed in Germany. I was a ditty bopper. That's like a Morse code, and that was my specialty. And ditty boppers had a real weird kind of reputation in the Air Force because it required, it required a kind of specialized focus. Morse code is not an easy thing, and in order to pass in the school, you had to really be very proficient in it. And for some reason, I took to it pretty easily, and I became a member of the security service in the Air Force, which was really an elite.
Was it like a spy?
Kind of like surveillance. Like when I graduated from Diddy Bop school, I was considered a radio operator, a Morse code intercept operator is what they called it, and I was I was transferred to Germany, where I monitored the Iron Curtain, so to speak, the edges of the Iron Curtain, the Soviet bloc, and the communications that went on. All of them used the same kind of, amazingly, they all used the same kind of code. Morse code was international, and so you could interpret what they were saying, and that was my job. I did, and I could have only exposed this 15 years after my service. I couldn't tell anyone what I was up to while I was up to it. So it was a really weird situation while I was. But while in the military, I met some of the most radical cats I've ever met. I spent a little time in Thailand, and where this was during the Vietnam War, and in Thailand there was a lot of animosity to the U.S. From the rebels, from the young people who were radical. They resented American colonialism, like other nations did, and so they resented this country's intervention into Vietnam. They were very.
But they were welcoming to the black people.
Well, they were hostile to the U.S. military, the white folks, but black military people would go to the parts of town where they were dominant, where black people would party. And this was also where the Khmer Rouge and the Viet Cong sympathizers would hang out. But they embraced black soldiers. They looked at us as members of a third world aggregation, not as the interlopers that the white military was. And so that, in me, being a young cat and seeing that kind of difference, it increased my consciousness about what was the U.S. up to? Why did they feel an immediate kind of fraternal relationship to black soldiers and not to white soldiers? All of that was something that I was beginning to examine, in a more serious way. I brushed up against it while I was before I came into the service, because that was also, the period of Malcolm. Malcolm talked about a lot of this stuff, but it never really penetrated until I began to see it personally, how people related to African Americans, and how African Americans related to, especially like veteran military folks, sergeants and whatnot. When I first came in, I was saying, man, they're remarkably bitter about this country to have all these stripes, So it was really an unusual period for me, very formative period.
I always wondered during that time, they were back in the States. They were protesting the war. How did y'all feel about that?
We were with that. In September, I'm going to be in a documentary on Muhammad Ali, and one of the sections in there, they talk about, because I also mentioned I was in the service, and they asked similar questions. How did we feel about Muhammad Ali's refusal to join the military? We were with that all the way. We thought that was powerful. And we were we were shouting them out for real. Most of the black folks in the military, we didn't, we saw what was happening. We understood what the U.S. was up to. Black soldiers knew that better than anyone else. We understood how the military was really performing an act of imperialism in Vietnam, and a lot of black soldiers were being used as cannon fodder. But at the same time, we were encased in that system, and it was a duality. It's really much the same kind of duality that we find ourselves in general in this country. The same kind of duality we had when Barack Obama was president. He was a black man. He was president. We expected him to do something for black people, but his job description was to advance the fortunes of the United States of America and to protect it at all costs, and to advance to advance its cause wherever it can. That was his job description. So although we knew that, we were expecting Obama to do something positive for African Americans. So we were always in that conundrum, in that dilemma. We've always been there since we were imported here from Africa.
What is cannon fodder?
That's what you use to rather than actual bullets. You use that to bluff as a bluff. You use that, and you use up energy uselessly in that bluff. That's the whole idea behind it.
So you said they used black people like that?
Well, that's how we thought of it, that black people, because black people were dying more than others. Black people were dying disproportionately on the battlefields of Vietnam. We were the primary, well, we were not the primary, but we were heavily sampled, a heavy sample of the infamy, the
infantry.
There you go. What did I say? Infamy. We were heavily sampled in the infantry. Black people were disproportionately members of these combat units, and so we had high fatality rates.
So what if you had not gone to the service? Hypothetically, would you have gone to become a part of the Black Panthers?
As I ultimately did.
Yeah.
That's hard to that's hard to say because the Panther Party was very attractive.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, did you have that same mindset going into the service that you had?
No. I was a young boy when I went into service. I was 17. I went into the service when I was 17 years old. So I was, just a teenager.
Yeah, but were you headed? You know what I'm saying? Was your head headed that way?
When you're that young, you really don't know where your head is headed. Like I said, I heard Malcolm at on 125th Street outside of the Harlem Memorial Bookstore. I used to hear him frequently there, and so I had an affinity for that because everybody who heard Malcolm had an affinity for Black nationalism after hearing that brother. He was so powerful, and I was a very young guy, so I did have that. I had that move. I wasn't really with the civil rights movement. I thought they were too rural and agrarian. So I didn't dungaree, all that. I wasn't with and singing hymns and Christianity. All of that seemed to me to be kind of Uncle Tomish. That's how I thought of it. And so I was really attracted to Malcolm's brand of Black, of Black defiance.
Yeah, he and Martin Luther King seemed like they were at different ends. When King was still saying Negro when everybody else was saying Black.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Right. Plus, Southern accents. From being from New York, you think of people as being country and all that, and it was arrogant, and really when you look back on it, it was laced with white supremacy. Black people in New York think that we are, they thought that they are the urbane example, the pinnacle of Black urbanity, right. Essentially, and everybody else was kind of country, so. There was that was going on, and even in the movement that was going on. So Malcolm was urbanity, he was sheer Black audacity, and we really dug that. So like in this film, Muhammad Ali represented that as well. Like when he fought Floyd Patterson, man, we were so happy that he humiliated Floyd Patterson. Man, that was so gratifying to us. So, but when I went in the service, I met all these other militant cats, and I got shot in the service. Ultimately.
So that had something to
that had a lot to do. I got shot by a white guy in Georgia. So that had a lot to do with me turning toward the Panther Party. In fact, right after I got shot, right before I was supposed to get discharged, so I had to stay in the service a little bit longer while I rehabilitated. And as soon as I rehabilitated and left the service, I went straight to the Panther Party office and joined up. Right after that, I didn't even go home. Right after I got off the plane, I went to the Panther. That's how dedicated I was to do this. And so, that started a whole new era in my life. With the Panthers.
Did you regret burning up your uniform?
Oh, I didn't even mention that. See, which is what I did. I burned my uniform when I left Georgia, I burned it in my dorm room. And I don't know. I didn't regret it. No.
I mean, so now you don't have.
At first, I regretted it because I thought that they were going to check. When I got off the plane, I saw a lot of military people around. So they had sent them after me for burning up the. I thought they may have caught on to the barracks and burned the barracks down, and so they were going to blame me for that. But no, I wasn't. I was glad to get out of the service. You know,
Really?
although, man, it looking back and retrospectively. It was a very beneficial part of my life, very, very foundational. And it financed my college education. So, it proved to be very beneficial.
So, okay, so then you, how did that, you get from there to reparations? Am I skipping a lot?
That's a whole lot. but yeah, it's a whole lot.
Well, let me rephrase that. How did you get from? To me, the Black Panthers were so different from the NOI.
Not really. Not really. I mean, yeah, in some ways, yeah, I could see you were saying that, but it was the same sensibility, defiance. And in fact, much of the Panther Party was inspired by the NOI. I mean, the Panther Party was inspired by Malcolm, just like the cultural nationalists were inspired by Malcolm. That's how influential and pivotal he was as a figure in our history. Malcolm was a member of the nation, but he talked about revolutionary movements in Africa, post-colonial, anti-colonial movements in Africa, how we were related. He talked about the role of capitalism and the suppression of indigenous groups around the world. Much of that is what inspired Huey Newton and Bobby Seale to form the Panther Party. They took that and they went from that and they explored Marxism and the ideas that Malcolm introduced, and they took it to another level. Anti-colonialism, they began to delve into that very strongly. And so the Panthers took that revolutionary heritage that Malcolm introduced, that revolutionary spirit that Malcolm introduced into the community, the international revolutionary spirit. Malcolm also introduced this reverence for Africa, reaching across to the place where we came from to try to embrace a cultural tradition that is antagonistic and that can help nurture us, to defy the Western indoctrination that we've received so far. And Malcolm got that from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam's teaching, and so.
I wonder, do people don't really give Kwame Ture credit for Pan-Africanism and like they do Malcolm? Why is that? I mean.
Stokely Carmichael?
Yeah.
Before Stokely, yeah. Well, Stokely came through SNCC. Stokely came out of the civil rights movement. He came from a different trajectory and moved on into Pan-Africanism. So Stokely came out of that organizing trajectory in the South, where they were fighting for voter registration and voter expression of black people in Lowndes County and those parts of the South. That's where Stokely got his chops in that struggle. And as he gained stature in the movement, he began to expand, and he became, he connected to Africa, and he changed his name, Kwame Ture, giving credit to both Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, and Ture, who was the president of Guinea, or it was Guinea-Bissau. I forgot which one, but so he combined those names, and he attempted to infuse that Pan-African spirit into the civil rights movement. The SNCC contingent of the civil rights movement was moving toward black nationalism. Anyway, they in 1967. I'm not sure exactly what year. I think it was 67 when they kicked white people out. SNCC was at one point interracial. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was one time an interracial group that was, the edge, the activist edge of the civil rights movement. But when Stokely came in and became the chairman of SNCC, they kicked white people out and became all black. And so SNCC had turned nationalist, and Stokely just kept that trajectory going until he became Pan-Africanist. But he came at it really after Malcolm. Malcolm was the one who really started that whole momentum.
But I remember.
Well, he didn't start it, but he accelerated it.
Right. I just remember. I mean, Malcolm. He brought us black unity and the positiveness of blackness, but it seems like Stokely was the one that really got us saying black, calling ourselves black.
If you're talking about Black Power,
and just black, because because Martin Luther King, I know he was so resistant to that. We are Negroes, we're not black.
well, he turned Malcolm. Malcolm.
Yeah, he
turned.
finally. Martin.
He turned later, but black. That was Malcolm, man. The Nation of Islam.
Okay, see,
It wasn't so much. It wasn't so much Malcolm.
Stokely.
Well, it was Malcolm, but he was only the spokesman for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The Nation of Islam had been talking blackness since the 30s. Black, and then Marcus Garvey, black. So Stokely was, he was a major figure. I'm not, I'm not trying to deflate him or diminish him, but he wasn't the progenitor of this stuff. This had been going on. He accelerated some of the trends. He did, no doubt, but he was another cat.
Okay, I just felt like he didn't get enough credit.
No, he's any Kwame Ture, he deserves more credit, no doubt. he was an influential figure, absolutely. One of the things about Stokely, which is also Kwame, which is also underplayed, is how how influential so-called Caribbean or so-called West Indian or Caribbean leadership was in our movement throughout our history, and Stokely was no exception. Malcolm's mother was from Grenada. Farrakhan's folks are from the Caribbean. Caribbean is deeply, deeply embedded in our leadership, fraternity and sorority, because there were sisters also involved who had Caribbean roots. So that's a thing that often isn't mentioned when we think about Stokely. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
WIIFTV PM. WIIFTV PM.
Media's just for you and me. WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me.
Introducing your trusted source for high-quality black emojis, better known as Blackmoji. We believe black is beautiful, and that beauty should be reflected in the digital market. Now there is an app that does just that, starting with Black Greek letter organizations. Blackmoji D9 offers more than an emoji app. It is a cultural experience of black excellence. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store to access a specially curated catalog of emojis representing the Divine Nine. Use the emojis to celebrate Black Greek events, acknowledge current events, support social causes, and learn about esteemed Black Greek members who blaze the trail of Black history. A portion of every subscription goes toward a scholarship fund specifically for members of Black Greek letter organizations to help keep the legacy alive. Download the Blackmoji app today.
food to my.
Okay.
And we are back. Salim Muwakkil here in Muwakkil'S world with my producer, Sister Emma Young. We're talking retrospectively today. Share the broadcast, you know.
Turn this on. You didn't turn the thing on.
Huh?
You didn't turn it. Oh, never mind. It's on.
It's a delay.
Okay.
Nothing.
Okay. Retrospectively, we are talking, and Sister Emma Young, my producer, we are just going over some stuff, trying to trace the trajectory of my ideological perspective these days, which, those of you who listen to the show know that I'm pretty seriously reparations oriented. Come to that conclusion after many trials and errors and explorations of other ideological perspectives. By the way, share the broadcast if you will to help things go along.
So there was a time when you were anti-reparations?
It's hard. I can't really remember being anti-reparation. I just didn't think of it as a remedy. I didn't think of it as plausible, I guess.
Right, or as a possibility.
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
It's still hard to think.
It's easy for me to think of it as plausible now, but I did at one point. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think we should really be aggressive in pushing for it, because it seems absolutely plausible.
Plausible, but what about possible? Given the whole mindset, of this country. I mean, if they don't want critical race theory, imagine how adamant they would be against giving us trillions of dollars.
Yeah, that is true. But they didn't want the reconciliation package that Biden passed earlier this year either. Those same folks, those antagonists, the Republican antagonists, the Trumpians, the Colt 45, they didn't want that either. But it passed through maneuvers, through legislative maneuvers, because there were enough people in this country who were convinced that it would be beneficial for Americans to receive these benefits. And so I think the very similar arguments can be made, and they're increasingly being made by the captains of industry even, that if you take care of that plunder, if you repair the plunder the African Americans suffered, this economy in this country would skyrocket. America would prosper as never before. And that logic is beginning to win over a lot of folk. And so I think that makes it even more plausible, because in general, what white Americans think of of things that benefit African Americans as a zero-sum situation because of the legacy of slavery, and it was that was the case for many years, because for centuries, in fact, that's when the culture of this country was formed. What was good for African Americans was bad for white Americans, because slavery was absolutely essential for the economic sustainability and advancement of this country. And so whatever endangered our enslaved status was negative for white Americans. And that zero-sum relationship is what guides the thinking of many white Americans today. But that's erroneous thinking. That zero-sum thinking is erroneous. And it is the data that is coming out is making that increasingly plain. Is clarifying that negative relationship to the point where it's considered uninformed to argue the opposite these days. Most economists say, indeed, that if African Americans are to achieve economic equity, this entire economy would prosper. And so that's the argument that's beginning to win. And that's why I think it's increasingly plausible.
Well, what is the NOI? How do they feel about reparation? Oh. Mm-hmm. How does the NOI feel about reparation, given their, I can't see them wanting anything from the white man.
No, the nation talked about giving land to a whole portion of land, but not just economic resources, but land, real estate, actual property, states, and then providing us with this is in the some of the writings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, they're providing us with the resources necessary for a certain amount of years and just leaving us alone.
I agree with that 100%. To just have our own separate. And why weren't we ever able to do like the Chinese do with Chinatown? Why weren't we able to do that?
Because Chinese came here is a different process, a completely different process. Chinese came here as immigrants with a culture intact, deep culture. The Han Chinese culture is deep and multifarious. It spans generations. They have a very intricate history of relationships as autonomous people with other civilizations. The Han Chinese are notorious for succeeding wherever they go. In any part of the world, the Han Chinese are disproportionately successful, much like Ashkenazi Jews. And that's really one of the reasons for that is these people have deep civilizational structures that inform their behavior, high levels of cultural capital that inform their behavior. Their behavior is dictated in ways that assure success. They cultivate the sensibilities that assure success wherever they go. And so the Han Chinese are a completely different story than African Americans who were severed from our culture, from our various cultures, not just one culture, our various cultures in West Africa for the most part, and completely deposited in a land that was totally hostile. So we had to invent a culture, essentially. We had to invent a culture from scratch, a culture that was framed by white supremacy and other kinds of depredations. So our development is an entirely different process than other immigrant groups' development.
Wow. So if we got cultural capital, we could separate. You know what I'm saying?
You're saying that it's difficult for us to separate now because we lack the cultural capital and wherewithal to do that. It would be hard for us to sustain ourselves.
Right, that's what I'm saying. If we had the cultural capital, but we wouldn't be able to get the cultural capital without reparations. Is that what you're saying?
My point, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I've reached that conclusion. I tried not to reach it. I tried to say that, well, we can do it ourselves, we can do for self. We can, because, we are powerful people, we can, the John Henry syndrome, essentially. Like John Henry, he thought he could outwork the engine and wound up killing himself. He had confidence, but that confidence was not well deployed. So, it's hard to acknowledge that we're crippled. It's hard to acknowledge our handicap because we are men and we want to be respected as men, and we haven't been respected as men. And so that's a hunger for the black community, as we want that respect. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that we lack wherewithal in certain areas, and and if we don't boast of that, we're gonna continuously go around in circles and I hear a lot of people talking, about vigilante activity to fight crime. Mm-hmm. I understand that so well because, we don't want our community to be hostage to criminal activity, and in many communities that's the way it is. But I'm a veteran of an attempt to do vigilante attacks against crime, and that attempt went disastrously wrong.
What was that?
It was in New Jersey. We tried to do that in New Jersey, right outside of Union, a place called Vauxhall. It was a primarily black community. We made that our target, that we were gonna, because it had been overrun by cats. At the time, heroin was a big thing, and and the quest for that fix, people will do many things. And so we were trying to stop all of that dynamic. And, if you're not paid to do crime suppression, you have to volunteer to do it. It takes time out of your family life and out of the other things you do. And so we got a few brothers to do, who wanted to do that. They sacrificed. And in the attempt, many varied attempts, some of them got hurt. Who's going to pay? Who's going to take care of their family when they get hurt?
They got killed?
Hurt. Death was a part of it. That happened. Not when I was involved. That happened later on. But it kept happening. And the cycle kept going on. Because people who were doing the crime were members of the community too. They were simply on the edge of survival. They were doing what they had to do to survive. That's the way they looked at it. And the cats who were trying to stop them, they understood that, but they couldn't allow that to go on. And those clashing, those clashing realities caused a lot of community trauma that lasted for at least two generations. Families against families, because the people who were the crime fighters were against the people who were the crime, and then the next generation, they may have been the crime fight, and so it went on and on and on, and it wasn't ever really. I don't even know if today, although I haven't really heard much about what's going on in Vauxhall, but it was a dynamic of conflict, and I understand how that dynamic works, and it's very essential, I think, that we be really conscious about how that can happen. And how we need to guard against that when you create enemies. It becomes a civil war, a community civil war, and nobody really benefits. Right. The so-called criminal element doesn't benefit, nor does the so-called righteous element. Other attempts to do it, like with the Nation of Islam, they had a program called Dope Busters in the 80s, and even before that, the Nation used to do like crime. Cleanups and the projects in Newark, for example. And it was pretty successful. And a lot of people respected the Nation. And the Nation had a deep bench. They had cats who would willingly give their lives for the cause. And people who came up against them knew that. In fact, in the Nation, in Newark, we used to use Muhammad Speaks like, those things you put in the car to stop people from stealing your car. Those little
the club.
The club, right?
Yeah.
People would put Muhammad Speaks in their front seat instead of the club, because so a car thief would see Muhammad Speaks. He said, "I ain't messing with that car." That's the respect that the Nation of Islam had in that part of the country. So yeah, there were examples of how that kind of vigilante spirit can be successful, but it's very, very difficult to achieve that balance. And the brothers who did it in Vauxhall were trying to emulate the Nation in a way, but they didn't have what the Nation has. The Nation has a belief system and a chain of commands that demands a certain kind of disciplinary behavior, a disciplined behavior. And these cats didn't have it. We didn't have it, and neither did our successors. And I don't even know if we did have it, would it be all the way successful? Although, who knows?
I don't know, because, today's criminals aren't scared of nobody.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's this one gas station around my house where a woman can go and get gas, because there are always men around there.
Oh, yeah?
Watching.
Intentional? Is it intentional?
Intentional,
okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's very positive. That's very positive. And some brothers have done that here. Brother Quinn, Quinn McDonald has a group that does similar things. That's very positive. There's no way I can deny the power of that kind of effort. I'm just saying that there are limits to it.
Right, right. Yeah, it could be dangerous. I mean, to me, it can be dangerous just to have a gun in your house.
Oh, yeah, very dangerous. I mean, the statistics prove that danger.
Yeah.
That most people who injured themselves through gunshots, it's because of that. That's how those injuries occur. for the most part. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it is that danger. Yeah.
Yeah, but now, I think, and I've been thinking about this ever since I read, well, actually, ever since I saw Judas and the Messiah, that we need a Messiah. We need a leader. The black community as a whole has not had anybody since Dr. Martin Luther King that we could, look up to, even though people didn't agree. A lot of people didn't agree with him, but I think enough people did that he did show some leadership.
Yeah. Of course, you realize that's a very controversial.
Yes.
That's a very controversial view. A lot of
feminism.
Many of us, for many years, have said, "Man, the Messiah. That need for a Messiah is a indication of our own weakness, our own community dysfunction. The fact that we have to look to a Messiah. Strong communities don't need messiahs; they just need effective leaders who do things effectively. When you look whenever there's a quest for a Messiah, that's generally a sign of helplessness from a community. And yes, you can say that we are helpless.
We're helpless. We're not unified.
But also this idea of the people calling up the power or directing their own salvation through their own inherent community activity, I think is also an erroneous way to look at things. If you look at history, most times it does take a galvanizing leader to mobilize the community in a certain way.
Right.
All you need to do is look at the history of Chicago, and until Harold came along, a lot of people didn't think it was possible to have a black mayor, but just his energy alone produced that dynamic. So and you can find that in many other realms. So yeah, I think we need to rethink how we look at leadership, and that sometimes that charismatic, messianic edge is something that we need to inspire the people. Without it, it's hard to inspire people to do anything in any collective way. It's very difficult
to inspire us, and also to I don't know what to say, to negotiate for us, but somebody that we can go to and collectively with our ideas, and I don't know. You don't know what I'm saying because I don't know what I'm saying.
So someone who would be responsive to our particular
somebody we could right now, people like Jesse. Well, I'm not going to even count Jesse in anymore. I'm sorry, Jesse. But like Al, they're kind of beholden to the powers that be.
Oh, you mean someone with autonomous leadership, someone who's not connected to another kind of leadership stream or resource stream?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like Malcolm or like Minister Farrakhan represented.
Like Minister Farrakhan.
Yeah. So do you think that Minister Farrakhan's days are over too?
No. Well, he seemed to. The last time he spoke was a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's spoken since then, but I don't know if you remember that speech when he said he's going to sit down.
I do remember. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so he sat down.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's an octogenarian. That's time, brother. Minister, take some rest, my brother. You've been on the firing line for so long, man. The thing is that the people are so. What we gonna do without Mr. Farrakhan?
Right.
Like a piece I wrote, a column I wrote, went up, the fear of no Farrakhan.
Right.
There's certainly a fear of that.
Exactly, and he hasn't named a predecessor.
Just like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad hadn't named one either.
Right.
Right. And so that is. Although I think that the minister said that there's going to be a council of imams that will. Well, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what he said would take over, in his absence. But yeah, it is. That's a question.
And then there are some people who
the question, for the Nation of Islam, it's a question, and because the Nation of Islam is so pivotal and represents such a symbolic point of autonomy for the African American community in this country, for the African American community. Then it is important for the rest of the black community.
It is, but I think even when Minister Farrakhan was more active, because of the this whole religious thing, people didn't look up to him, or like Malcolm. We didn't think of Malcolm as representing the Nation of Islam. We thought of Malcolm as representing black people.
I don't know, my sister. I mean, it all depends on when you come at Malcolm. Because at one point, he wouldn't begin a paragraph without saying, "As the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us."
Right.
So you automatically knew he was representing
we
the
knew who
nation.
he was, and we knew he was the nation, but we were able to separate the man from the religion. I had a picture of Malcolm in my house, and a friend of mine who is a Christian, she said, "Well, God's not going to bless you until you take that picture down." It's this thing that people have separated him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was some of that. I remember, we used to think if you drank bean soup, you would automatically turn into a Muslim. When I was a young cat growing up in New York, that was some of the mythology that was out there about the Nation of Islam. And there was a Christian kind of protective thing going on. Islam was an alien theology, and you had to be on guard against that. Malcolm was something else. I suppose that there were some people who felt that.
I think there were too many, because he didn't become national, and then I guess it was the press. The press really didn't want him to become like Arsenio Hall show was canceled. Mm-hmm. Because he had the Honorable Minister Farrakhan on his show.
He disputes that assessment, but there are people who say, yeah, that's probably one of the reasons.
Such a coincidence. And as a matter of fact, I remember that show. Mm-hmm. And I remember them interrupting the show to talk about Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon had been passed or whatever, but they brought this on in the middle of, like it was breaking news or something, and they didn't finish the show.
I don't remember the specifics of the show, but I know Arsenio Hall disputes the contention that that's why they canceled him. He said there were other reasons, but I'm sure that might have been influential. Yeah. People don't like. Of course, people don't like the message of the Nation of Islam. A lot of folks don't. But there are some people who say that they do. That there are those in power appreciate the racial separation that is being advocated by the Nation of Islam. That they appreciate that, and because they fear racial. The idea that there would be class unity against the corporate leadership of this country. The capitalist corporate leadership is vulnerable to class unity, interracial class unity. That's the real threat. That's what some people say. So that they say the nation is really helpful to the corporate effort because it keeps the races divided. That's one perspective.
Right, because also I remember the March on Washington, not the March on Washington, the Million Man March, it got so much pushback that it was a huge success. The media made it a success because of all the people who said they didn't want to do. I mean, you know, that this was a terrible thing to do, and
Million Man March. That's a good place to pause for a moment, and we will take that up when we come back right after this.
Yeah.
WIIFTBPM.
WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me. WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me. Check. Oh, please, don't you rock my boat, 'cause I don't want my boat to be right. Oh, please, don't you rock my boat. Oh, no, 'cause I don't want my boat to be right. I'm telling you just, I like it like this. So keep this like this. And you should know by now. I like it. I like it like this. Yeah. By my soul. Oh yeah. By my soul. Every little action sends a reaction. Oh, can't you see what you've done for me? Oh yeah, I'm happy inside all of the time. When we bend the new corner, I feel like a sweepstakes winner. When I meet you around the corner, you make me feel like a sweepstakes winner. Watch out. Can't you see? You must believe me. Oh, darling, I'm calling. Can't you see? Why won't you believe me? Oh, darling, I'm calling. When I meet you around the corner.
And we're back. We're back in Muwakkil'S world after listening to that wonderful a cappella rendition of Satisfy My Soul. Man, I love the way this brother Sam Trump does that. Beautiful stuff. Emma, what we were talking about, I think, is what were we talking about?
Well, I guess we started out talking about we need a Messiah. We need
Yes.
a leader. Mm-hmm. We need somebody to you know.
What I didn't finish though is after the Panther Party and how because you asked about the Panthers and the nation, that they seem to be at odds.
Right. Yeah, how did you go from the Panthers to the nation, because they seem to have whole different philosophies?
Yeah, it really wasn't that different. The difference is, well, in some ways it wasn't that different, but in some ways it was very different. The Nation of Islam was religious, it had a theology that it in a dogma. The Panther Party also had a dogma, but it was a political dogma, Marxist-Leninism, and it was kind of a pigeon Marxist-Leninism. It wasn't straight orthodox Marxism. It was a variety of Marxist-Leninism, taking off on what the Chinese did with Mao and what the Cubans did with Castro, and various Marxist formations did. It was the Panthers' attempt to accommodate Marxist-Leninism, design a sort of Marxist-Leninism to appeal to the black community and what was going on. So there was that. But the defiance was very similar. Defiance of white oppression, defiance of white hegemony, or hegemony, as some folks would prefer. So it had the similarities. But I realized when I was in the Panther Party that it didn't have, there was nothing in the Panther Party that stopped brothers from doing the debilitating stuff that we did in general, that mitigated the debilitating lifestyles that weakened our community, in many ways. The stuff that we did, the stuff that, getting high all the time, partying all the time, messing with a lot of women, not taking care of your children, all of that stuff that became our current. It was the things that we did. It was considered the cultural way of life for a lot of black men.
Really?
Yeah.
So you left.
Are you saying that that's not recognizable to you? I mean, that's all we did. We partied, women, all that. That was our life. That was our life, especially young black men. That was what we did. And so, we understood that was not a positive thing. And both organizations tried to adjust our behavior to stop doing that kind of stuff. And the Panthers often failed. Like a lot of times we would have a demonstration plan, and the brothers wouldn't show up because they had been out all night, and they were still in bed. They would hangovers. I mean, their behavior was undisciplined. Our behavior was undisciplined, and you can't do anything serious if you have undisciplined people with you. We have to have some sort of a code of conduct to operate under. At least the people who are in leadership are the people who you're looking to provide some sort of direction. And the Panthers were failing in that in some ways. In some ways they weren't, but in other ways, cats wouldn't show up when we needed them. And I understood that lack of discipline was something that we had to address very seriously. Because if we wanted to be the revolutionaries, if we wanted a revolution, we had to be the revolutionaries. If we wanted a new kind of black person, we had to be that new black person. And you couldn't be that black person doing the same thing the old black person was doing, which was doing debilitating things in our community. And that's when I began to realize that the Nation of Islam was addressing that very issue in ways that few other people were doing, and even in terms of diet. This is something we really didn't think of as, what you eat, really, what that have to do with the Black Revolution? But it has a lot to do with it, because it determined our energy levels. It determined much of what we did in our activism, in our role as activists. And the Nation of Islam was really the only organization talking about diet, linking these widespread cultural things in one whole in a way that made sense, that had a certain coherence to it. And so more and more I began to see that what Elijah Muhammad was talking about was really what made the most sense for our people.
Really? So even while you were in,
even while I was in the Panthers, I began to see that. Yes, and and also I began to see that much of what the Panthers did was really emulating the Nation of Islam. Our meetings, our chain of commands, lieutenant, our paramilitary chain of command was very similar to the Fruit of Islam. I didn't realize that until I got in the Nation and saw that. Then I realized, damn, the Panthers were taking up definitely, and the cultural nationalists as well. Imam Mubarak's joint, the Committee for Unified Newark, and those cultural nationalist groups like Qaeda and Maulana Ron Karinga, that whole cultural nationalist formation, many of their traditions were taken from the Nation as well. And I began, and I didn't know that either until I joined the Nation of Islam.
okay.
So it was, and I began to see that the nation was really serious about changing our conditions, and this other group was really, in a lot of ways, cathartic. It was a catharsis. We were mad at white people, we were mad at the police, and we wanted them to know how mad we were, and we did things to exhibit our anger, but it was really catharsis. I mean, what else? What?
Okay, because I thought the Panthers came in. I didn't think they were mad at everybody when they started. I thought it was because the police or the powers that be saw, these people together, and J. Edgar Hoover and them, and decided, that they were, this group that they need to come against and eliminate, and that's when the Panthers, became defensive.
Well, the Panthers started out as a self-defense group. That was the point, against the police. But then the Panthers adopted a Marxist-Leninist ideology. Revolution was the goal. We wanted to revolt. We wanted violent revolution against this country, and we wanted allies, international allies. We wanted violent revolution.
I never knew that.
We had community survival programs like Feed the Children, and
right.
and I was deeply involved in that, and tutorial programs and lunch programs. I was deeply involved, and that was a part of our agenda. But it was to turn people toward revolution. It was to turn people toward understanding the errors of this capitalist insect that was sucking our blood.
Okay, I thought that was a reaction.
That was the whole point of the Panther Party. It was the ideology of the Panther Party, Marxist-Leninism.
Okay, so then, wow. All right, so then after you left the Panther and you got into the NOI, why did you leave the Nation?
Oh, in the Nation, I got deeply involved in the Nation, became a writer for Muhammad Speaks. That's really how I got involved in the Nation. I came through Muhammad Speaks, journalism, because I was writing for. I was the first black news writer for the Associated Press in Newark, New Jersey, the first black writer. So I had kind of I guess you could say a prestigious journalistic perch at the time. I was a AP reporter. The AP was considered top level. I did a lot of reporting on the black community, especially Newark at the time. But that was during that period when I was changing my ideology, because when I began at the AP, I still had some vestiges of the Panther thing going on, but not that much. I had been pretty much domesticated, or I had been pretty much converted to the Nation of Islam, I guess you can say. When I was in the Panthers, I used to wear a ferocious afro and mutton chops. I was trying to be defiant in my looks, and in the Nation, you calmed all that down. And so as far as the AP was concerned, I was a gentleman. I was a nice middle-class black gentleman with closely cropped hair and all of that. So I joined. I became a member of the AP, and I did a lot of stuff for the AP, a lot of stories. But then I started writing for Muhammad Speaks. I would do a piece for the AP in the objective mode of objective journalism, and then I would go home at night, transform myself into this ferocious black Muslim, and rearrange
like Superman,
rearrange the story in a way that it was more relevant to black people. Then send it to Muhammad Speaks. So I became a stringer, what a newspaper reporter for a major publication does in other cities. I became a stringer for Muhammad Speaks, and people began to see my name in Muhammad Speaks reporting from Newark. But I was still working for the Associated Press at the time. But then I had done so many pieces for Muhammad Speaks and had become, pretty popular, quite frankly. And then I got a call one day from Chicago, a sister named Valora Najib. She called me, and when I heard her name, I said, oh man, my heart started beating fast, because Valora Najib was a notorious secretary of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. She used to bring smoke into the lives of the fruit of Islam, because she was such a demanding secretary. Well, anyway, she called. She said, my brother, you going to be around? Somebody wants to speak to you. So I held the phone, and then I heard her voice, my brother? And I instantly recognized that it was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He said, I heard that you want to work for the nation. And we want you to come with us, my brother. So, my mind fogged up, and the first thing I could think of was, get me to Chicago. So I got a call.
That country town.
Dig that. I got invited by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad himself to come to Chicago, and so that, I think 2 days later, I was on the way. So I came here. I came here pretty urgently. I didn't have any place to stay. I stayed with a brother. I stayed with a brother's parents in Robert Taylor Homes. I stayed in Robert Taylor Homes my first 2 weeks in Chicago, because I had to get here. I didn't care where I had to stay. I got invited by God, essentially. Them. So I was here. I was in Chicago, man, and then I eventually got my family here. And did all that. But that's how I came to Chicago, and I was writing for Muhammad Speaks. That's really what kind of ushered me in to the nation in that way. Even when I was in Newark, and I came in at Newark, which was also the mosque that hatched the plot to kill Malcolm, by the way. And Malcolm was still considered persona non grata when I entered. He was considered. They called him the hypocrite. They didn't even call him Malcolm. They didn't even mention his name as Malcolm. He was the hypocrite. That was it. But still, so when I came to Chicago, I melted into the hierarchy, and traveled a lot. I traveled a lot I became an editor. I came in as an editor at Muhammad Speaks, not the editor, but news editor at Muhammad Speaks, and then I did a lot of traveling. A lot of places, covered a lot of people, covered Minister Farrakhan a lot, covered Muhammad Ali when I first, came in, and then the nation changed. Wallace Muhammad came along. 75, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad died. He passed. The messenger passed, and his son took over. There was a lot of intrigue and a lot of mystery about who was going to take over after the Honorable Elijah Muhammad died, because nobody really knew he had a successor. But he seemed to have been grooming his son. His son was giving regular lectures every Thursday, and people began to be attracted to some of the teachings that his son was bringing. There was a nuance to them that was a little bit different than what his father was saying, and people were a little bit attracted to that. And so they increasingly grew, the crowds grew, and so people kind of suspected that the messenger was grooming his son for this particular job. And so when he passed, a lot of people were saying, well, it may be Farrakhan. He's the most prominent spokesman of the messenger. It may be Elijah too, his son. It may be Jeremiah Shabazz. All kind of people were giving particular candidates their support. And a lot of people thought Minister Farrakhan would be it because he was so, articulate. But in many ways, Minister Farrakhan was greeted with the same kind of suspicion that Malcolm was greeted. He was very articulate. He had an intellectual bent that a lot of people in the nation didn't really trust. There was an anti-intellectual bias against cats who had mastered intellectual complexities, and so that was always something that Malcolm had to fight against. But Minister Farrakhan as well, and when he came in, there was a little bit of that against Farrakhan. That's really one of the primary reasons why he didn't have much support, the deep support of the family members of the nation. He had some support out in the precincts. But in the heart of the leadership, he wasn't that popular. So Wallace came on. He was considered, that Master Farad Muhammad had written his name. It was all kind of lore about Wallace Muhammad, and so he got the nod, so to speak, and everybody unanimously agreed, And he changed the nation. And I was in during that period, that very tumultuous period. I covered the funeral. I covered a lot of the speculation about who would be next and blah, blah, blah. And so I was right there when all that was going on and all that turmoil was happening. And I was in many ways charged with changing the paper, because the paper also changed from Muhammad Speaks to Balalian News. And its range of subjects expanded as well. Wallace Muhammad wanted us to remake the world. That was the motto: remake the world. Not like the nation was. We got our own world that was happening. But the Wallace was saying, remake the world. Go out there and change things. And so we began to do movie reviews, record reviews, all kind of stuff that we hadn't done in the past.
Yeah, I had some long articles too.
In the Balalian News? Or Muhammad Speaks?
Maybe it was Muhammad Speaks. I know one of them had some long...
Yeah, Muhammad Speaks was dedicated to providing a serious examination of our international situation. So often these articles were long and scholarly,
right.
Often. And that's why it was so popular. It was one of the most popular publications in the world at one point. Had an amazing circulation. Muhammad Speaks did. Incredible. But Balalian News changed the focus a little bit and became more worldly, more concerned with what was going on in popular culture, movie reviews. The Nation of Islam didn't go to movies, and we really were not supposed to engage in sport and play. That's why there was always a little bit of reluctance to embrace Muhammad Ali real strong, because he was a boxer, and that was something that we didn't, and that's beneath the nation, essentially. But when Wallace took over, that changed. When Warif Deen, who became Warif Deen, it became the World Community of Islam, and things changed. And that was also the period when, right after the messenger died, that same year, we got an invitation to come to Uganda for the Organization of African Unity convention, and Wallace Muhammad designated Minister Farrakhan as the designated ambassador, and so I was the journalist assigned to that trip, and so I accompanied Minister Farrakhan to Uganda. Him and I and his bodyguard, and we had a wonderful time. I spent a lot of time with the minister. This was right after Wallace took over, and so the minister was still. The minister had expressed his loyalty And he was behind Warif Deen Muhammad at that time. But he was still a little bit reluctant to go all the way, you know. And you know, we had discussions about it because it was a big change. Wallace represented a big change in the nation. The nation, you know, underwent a significant ideological alteration during that period. And it was rough on a lot of people. A lot of people didn't go for it. A lot of people moved away from it at that point. Minister Farrakhan was still there, but he had a lot of pressure. A lot of folks who didn't appreciate what Wallace was doing they were beckoning Minister Farrakhan to come on, break away, let's start it again. But he was resisting that for a while, and then he eventually stopped resisting because he also thought, I mean, he thought that there was a need for this kind of nationalist focus and for the behavioral discipline that the nation represented, and that the world community of Islam took away a little bit. It mitigated a lot of that strict discipline and dress codes and all of the dogma, much of the dogma that the Nation of Islam presented, that the world community of Islam rejected. And after a while, Minister Farrakhan pulled away.
So then you had another dilemma. Who am I going to follow?
Well, not really, not at that time, because when Warif came in, I had felt some fatigue with what the nation was doing myself. So when Wallace came in, I kind of said, well, I understand some of that, you know. I was never really one for religious dogma anyway. You know, my sensibilities are more libertarian than religious or sectarian. But for the good of the black community, for our best interests, I saw the Nation of Islam as the best way to go. And so I had to just alter my behavior and adjust my belief systems to accord that, you know, to come in accord with that, because who else but the nation was doing what it was doing? You know, that was my reasoning at the time. You know, and then I changed as I stayed in. I saw some benefits, and I also saw some detriments. And then after my experience with Warif Deen Muhammad, you know, I became the editor of Balalian News, and then I began to express some questions about what Warif was doing, and then his followers started looking at me kind of funny, you know, and then I began to say, well, look, you know, if you're involved in any kind of organization with a certain kind of dogma, organizational dogma, you have restrictions. There's certain things that you can't do. You can't think freely, quite frankly. I mean, you have to think within certain restrictions, because that's what organizations do. They frame your speculation, and I didn't think I needed that any longer. I had lived long enough and experienced enough to come to my own conclusions in a lot of ways, and so that's where I'm at.
So that's why you abandoned.
I abandoned that. That makes it sound like such a dramatic move. No, I didn't abandon. I just moved on. You know, I want to say evolve, because that seems like I'm saying that I went beyond. I just moved on. Certain things attracted me in ways that it didn't in the past. You know, I began to become more attracted to more expansive spiritual traditions that had other kinds of concepts, and we'll talk about those concepts when we come back from this break. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
WIIFTBPM.
Media's just for you and me. WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me.
crash system? Are you in need of spyware or virus removal from your computer? Well, contact RPC Computer Repair in South Shore and let us help you with all your computer repair services and print needs. Need office or print production services, copies, scans, fax, or even notary service? Then stop by and support RPC Computer Repair and Print Shop located 1741 East 71st Street in the 71st Street corridor, newly revitalized South Shore areas, and let RPC be your one-stop shop, where we believe RPC is your PC. RPC Computer Repair is also a UPS access point where you can drop off and pick up your important packages. So let RPC be of service to you. Call RPC Computer Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. through 6 p.m. at 773-966-4457. That's 773-966-4457. Visit RPC at rpccomputerreinc.com for more information.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, and I think of all the things, what you're doing, and in my head I paint a picture. Well, since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. But won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Did you have to go to jail? Put your house on up for sale. Did you get a good lawyer? I hope you didn't catch a tan. I hope you find the right man who'll fix it for you. And are you shopping anywhere? Change the color of your hair. Are you busy? And did you have to pay that fine that you've been dodging all the time? Are you still dizzy? Oh, yeah. Since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Oh, stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over there? Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, and I think of all the things, what you're doing. In my head I paint a picture. Since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over there? Why don't you come on over,
And we're back in Muwakkil'S world with my producer, Sister Emma Young. We're talking a whole lot of stuff about the transition period in the nation when I was there, when Wallace Muhammad took over, some of the alterations that happened. Where was I in all of that, and how did I make sense of all of that? You know, it was a tumultuous period, and one of the things that's really amazing is how free of bloodshed it was, because like I say, I came in Newark, the Temple 25, notorious temple in the Nation of Islam, 25 in Newark and number 4 in Philly were the two most was it 4? I think Philly was 4. Were the two most militant temples in the nation. 25 was where the plot to kill Malcolm was hatched, and it was still like I say, they were very anti-Malcolm at the time. They called him the hypocrite. I came in, at a time when it was pretty when there was still a whole lot of anger at what happened to Malcolm. While I was in 25, the minister was assassinated, James Shabazz. He was a minister who a lot of people say has really hated Malcolm. And was instrumental in trying to get rid of him. He was murdered. He was assassinated, and people who were accused of assassinating him were then assassinated. So it was a whole cycle of violence that was going on in Newark at that time. Cats were being beheaded. There were twins, some brothers who were twins, believers, who were twins. Their heads were severed and put on different bodies. The head of one twin was put on the body of the other twin, that kind of thing. It was really vicious stuff going on. And so I came in at that time, and so I knew that there was the potential for a whole lot of violent activity. Whenever you get into religious sectarianism, the potential for violence is high, always, no matter where it is. And so when Minister Farrakhan and Wallace Muhammad had that little separation, there were a lot of people who anticipated that would be a violent split as well. And it could well have been, because there were a lot of hard feelings. But both men really admirably shepherded their flocks in ways that avoided that violence. Admirably. And you really have to give it to Minister Farrakhan, because he had a really a harder job, because they weren't under one rubric. A lot of these people were just antagonists of Wallace, and the direction that the Nation of Islam had gone, the World Community of Islam, then the American Muslim Mission it became, and there were people who were still angry at that. And so the fact that Minister Farrakhan kept all of that corral in a really serious and complex way is an admirable feat that I don't think people appreciate yet. How amazing it was that he kept those troops in check, and Wallace as well, because there was similar kinds of antagonisms on the other side.
So who kept the paper? Wallace kept the paper?
Well, it became the Bilalian News, and then the American Muslim Mission was the Muslim Journal. It became the Muslim Journal. It lost its it lost its Nation of Islam affiliation. It became more associated with worldwide Sunni Islam, the so-called Orthodox Islam. The Muhammad Speaks evolved into the Final Call. Minister Farrakhan he brought a resurgence of the spirit of Muhammad Speaks in the Final Call.
Did you ever write for the Final Call?
I wrote a piece in it once upon a time, but no, never any kind of regular way, no.
So actually, your loyalty stayed with Wallace until you left, huh? Yes.
Uh-huh. I guess you could say that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Although you and Farrakhan became friends.
Yeah, I was never, I've always been close with both sections. I've never, I've maintained cordial relationships with the various sections, the various iterations of Islam, of the Nation of Islam here. So yeah, I mean, it was. There were times when I had some dicey situations develop. I wrote a piece about there was a period when I became what you would call a debunker. When I first left the Nation, I was pretty disenchanted with a lot of stuff, and so I became kind of I would take the opportunity to debunk certain things when I had the chance, and that, or I would be less reverential than perhaps people thought I should have been. Not so much debunking. I was not as reverential. I would question some things that Minister Farrakhan did in ways that weren't considered appropriate. Yeah, so Minister Farrakhan had to call his troops off me one time. Yeah, they were gunning for me.
They were going to assassinate you?
I don't know what they were going to do, but the minister had to call them off. He said, man, he told them that he respected my writing, and that the Nation of Islam needed critics, and that the wrong thing to do is to attack critics. So I did some critical stuff in the Tribune, a column I wrote. It was not necessarily negative, just questioning, just questioning. I wasn't reverential. That's what it was. And so he said, no. He said, don't do that. Don't attack the brother for that. He has room to express his views if he wants to. Blah blah blah. So he called him off. But that was. Again, when you are critical of people who have a kind of divine imprimatur, then you can expect that kind of animosity. I mean, that's why people thought that Malcolm was a blasphemer. He wasn't just a traitor. He was creating apostasy because he was criticizing someone who many people thought was akin to God, had divine properties, and for someone like Malcolm X to criticize that was blasphemous, and
that was inside of NOI, because I think the people on the outside, we revered Malcolm. Mm-hmm. We never looked at him as a traitor or nothing.
I know that. I mean, that was the thing. A lot of people were saying that. You revere the follower, but you reject the teacher. The messenger is the teacher. Not only is he the teacher of Malcolm, he was a teacher of Muhammad Ali. He's a teacher of a whole class of folk, and he gets very little credit. That is true. Very few people give credit to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the kind of credit that he absolutely deserves for raising up a whole lot of people in a very hostile environment. A lot of people they're reluctant to give him credit because they don't think he has the exalted status that deserves that kind of credit. He's from Georgia, blah blah blah. He wasn't articulate, and all of that. But man, you think about the men who followed him. Think about the men he inspired.
Well, maybe it's because I never heard him speak. Maybe I heard him once or twice, but not like I heard Malcolm, not like I heard Minister Farrakhan. Mm-hmm. So he
wasn't eloquent like Malcolm and Minister Farrakhan. He wasn't eloquent at all. And we privilege eloquence. We worship eloquence in a lot of ways. And that same eloquence is what made Malcolm suspicious to a lot of members of the nation, because they said, man, he's a show off. He's not really teaching the truth, the serious substance. He's just a show off. The messenger's using him to get the people, blah blah blah. Same with Minister Farrakhan, the same kind of critique. But you have to credit the Honorable Elijah Muhammad with lifting up these folks like no one else has done. I mean, from inside the institutions of this country, nobody has had the kind of influence that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has had.
Right.
And he hasn't gotten credit for that. There's no doubt about it. He hasn't gotten credit for it. So there are people who are angry about that, and they say that he deserves that kind. There are people who say, well, the reason he doesn't get credit for it is because he is propounding a doctrine of racial essentialism. He is propounding a doctrine that says that white people are inherently evil and that black people are inherently divine. That's the kind of racial essentialism.
Big-headed man.
Well, that's part of the lore later on. But the essential thing is that one group of people are inherently divine, the other people are inherently evil, and that echoes in many ways the racial essentialism of groups like the Nazis and other kinds of groups that adhere to a racially essentialist doctrine. And so there are those who would say that what Elijah Muhammad is teaching is inherently dangerous because it talks about these inherent qualities of racial essentialism, and that is something that humanity has to transcend in order to have the kind of harmonious relationships we need as in cosmopolitan societies. So that's why people say we should reject that kind of, the Nation of Islam's doctrine.
So what happened, the way the nation brought you here from New York to Chicago, that had to be kind of a cultural shock for you.
In a way.
I mean, like I look at you now, and you are a Chicagoan.
Mm-hmm. I guess so. Yeah, I've been here long enough. But yeah, when I came here, like I said, I stayed in Robert Taylor Homes. That wasn't unusual for me. I stayed in projects in New York a lot of time. My cousins lived in the St. Nicholas project. I spent summers in the St. Nicholas projects in New York. So the projects were not new to me at all. In fact, Robert Taylor Homes has some redeeming qualities that I kind of dug, But Chicago is much less cosmopolitan than New York, much less. I was looking for reggae. I couldn't find any reggae until later on. I found some later on, but I couldn't. There were a lot of things that I was used to. Mambo, Latin music. Although Chicago had some of that too, but it didn't have it like New York.
It's kind of hidden away.
Yeah, hidden away. New York is a lot more freewheeling in some ways, but Chicago is much more Black American. It's the essential Black American city. Chicago is, and that is an attribute to be quite proud of. And I began to realize how different it was from New York in that way as well. New York, like I say, that image of the urbane New Yorker. You make fun of your country cousins, blah, blah. Chicago embraces its country cousins in a way that is very wholesome. New York, these guys are from the country, man. They're blips. We used to call people from below the Mason and Dixie line Blippians. They were from Blip. That means they didn't have much to teach us. They were country folk. So there was a whole lot of that kind of stuff going on in New York. It wasn't, and there wasn't that in Chicago. In fact, when I first came to Chicago, went to the gas station, and this cat was filling. At the time, there was a gas panic. I don't know, it was in the 70s. And I didn't even know if I would get enough gas to come here because a lot of gas stations were shutting down, Carter. It was during the period of, and I went to the gas station in Chicago and this cat came out and said, "You want regular or Ethel?" And I said, "Man, this is Chicago?" That kind of Southern accent, man. Because, Southern accents used to automatically mean Blippian. We automatically dismiss somebody with a Southern accent. But, and then, of course, later on, when New York, during the hip-hop era, New York claimed hip-hop real strong. And then the Dirty South came along and started to challenge New York's hegemony. I like to say it that way. And New Yorkers, man, they hated that challenge. The Dirty South? What you mean? The ghetto boys? Come on. So anyway, there's that arrogance, that northern arrogance that New Yorkers have.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And Chicago didn't have that. I met a lot of cats in Chicago, from Chicago, when I was in the service. And one thing about Chicagoans is there was a similar sensibility in some ways, like jazz. I met a lot of Chicagoans in the service who liked the same kind of jazz that I liked. There was that going on, but Chicagoans
and the doo-wops,
doo-wops as well. Absolutely, yep. In fact, as I've told you several times, I used to think a lot of these Chicago doo-woppers were from New York.
Like the
Eldorados, man. Nobody couldn't tell me that.
Yes.
Oh, is it no? Yeah, I mean, the Eldorado Magnificence. Who's that knocking? I mean, a lot of Chicago jams were we the Spaniels. The Spaniels, man.
Oh, man.
Woo.
Yeah.
That I could have sworn they were from 135th Street. So we claim doo-wop pretty strong. Same, New York arrogantly claimed doo-wop, just like New York arrogantly claimed hip-hop.
Right.
But that arrogance is justified. Doo-wop was really in many ways developed in New York, and it was cultivated strongly in New York, as was hip-hop. As was hip-hop. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I thought doo-wop was pretty much from Chicago.
No. I mean, there may be some shared patrimony.
Yeah.
But
I thought it started under the street lights on the corners of Chicago.
The corners of New York, man. That's where it began, Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, all of the original doo-wop sensations were, well, not all of them. Like the Spaniels were Chicago, and Gene Chandler and Duke of Earl, Duke. That was a Chicago thing. So yeah, there was that. But doo-wop, all that's an urban sensibility, and you find that it mostly is a product of urban cultures. Wherever doo-wop, you find some in L.A., very little, but you find some in the South too, like Memphis and Atlanta. There's some doo-wop there, but primarily doo-wop was a Chicago, New York, Detroit phenomena.
Right. And
Cleveland.
Y'all didn't say y'all.
Y'all. No, we didn't say y'all too much. That was again. That's something that happens in Chicago a lot. No, Chicago got a lot. It's proudly Southern, and it took a while for me to be equally proud of that Southern tradition, because I grew up with that anti-Southern bias. Country folk. My uncle used to, like I said, my uncle used to call it blip. And anybody, and he was married. His wife was from Alabama, and they loved each other. They were really an ideal couple. I mean, we used to really just like to see them. They were so joyous together. But he would always criticize and tease her about her Alabama roots and her Blippian roots. And he would always tell us, man, whatever you do, man, don't marry a woman from Blip. Please. Stay away from them Blippians, bro. And we took that to heart, I remember when I was in the service in Mississippi. Man, there was some beautiful, beautiful sisters in that part of Mississippi. Past Christianity, that was that highway that went from New Orleans all the way to Biloxi, that whole southern part of Mississippi, full of beautiful Cajun and mixed sisters of various kinds. And, it was like a paradise for a lot of us, and especially in the service, man, because, a lot of these sisters looked at service. I was stationed at a teaching base, and so a lot of cats were just coming through. They weren't staying for long. So if there were a lot of women there who they saw these brothers as a chance to get out of Mississippi. If they could hook up with a cat, with a service dude, and get married, they could leave and go somewhere else to a more glorious location. And so there was a whole lot of, solicitation going on. I mean, and man, it was an amazing experience. It really was an amazing experience. But I would always think about my uncle. Watch them Blippians, man. Don't get mixed up with them sisters from Blip, because there were some beautiful, beautiful women. It was hard to stay away from them. But yeah, that was that New York arrogance, I think some of that New York arrogance was a part of Malcolm's thing too. being from Temple Number 7. Temple Number 7 was considered the pinnacle of the Nation of Islam's leadership. If you were a minister at Temple 7, that was it. You had reached the pinnacle, and Malcolm was that. Malcolm was the minister at Temple Number 7, and everybody was in awe of his leadership, in awe of his intelligence. But as I say, within the nation, there was a lot of jealousy that we saw manifested later on, But that was from the top. I mean, it wasn't necessarily the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He's the one who put him on. He appreciated Malcolm's articulate ability to gather the crop, to gather the troops. He appreciated that, but there were a lot of cats in the nation who didn't.
But when you say like Mosque Number 25, they plotted to kill Malcolm. Us on the outside, we would never ever have thought that any Muslims had done that. I mean, we had no clue. We just knew it was the FBI.
No, I think a lot of people did. I mean, Malcolm was saying it himself. He was saying when he got bombed in his crib in Queens, he said the Nation of Islam did it. He said it. He said they're trying to get rid of him. He said it himself. So a lot of people knew what was going on.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, a lot. No, it wasn't a secret, really. A lot of people knew that there was serious animosity between members of the Nation of Islam and Malcolm's fledgling group. He was just on the verge of developing his own group at the time. I think Malcolm knew his time was short. As he said he taught himself what to do to traitors. He said he knew what they would do because he's the one who taught many of them, and he knew that he was in the line of fire. And if you think that someone is blaspheming a divine personage, someone who represents God himself, then it is almost your obligation to take action.
To kill them?
What else? Or to get, especially if you understand that there are orders from his lieutenants to do it. There's a documentary coming out pretty soon that's going to be pretty explicit. Already, the book, The Dead Are Rising. You have The Dead Are Rising. I know you haven't read it. It's a pretty hefty book.
I read parts of it.
But there's serious evidence in there of what happened. Serious evidence. Hard to refute that evidence that Brother Les Payne puts together on what happened to Malcolm and how the Nation of Islam was deeply implicated. Not necessarily the leadership, but forces that weren't quite renegade forces. There was some official complicity in this that he found. It's worth looking at. I don't think we should be ashamed or afraid to go into this stuff and be candid about it. We have to learn these lessons, We really have to learn these lessons. I think we can't allow that kind of dogmatism to make us kill each other. We have to understand that there's something deeper than that. And this, if we confront this in a serious way, it may help us get to that understanding.
Right. We need to make a lot of confrontations.
Yeah.
About a lot of stuff.
Yes, ma'am. Well, Emma, thank you, my dear. I appreciate you interrogating me for this period. Look, I'm there may be some. I won't mention it. I'll talk to you again shortly, and we will be back with Muwakkil'S World. Until then, peace.
WIFTBPM.
Do by myself and I look across the water and I think of all the things what you're doing, and in my head I paint a picture. Well, since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. But won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Did you have to go to jail? Put your house on up for sale. Did you get a good lawyer? I hope you didn't catch a tan. I hope you find the right man who'll fix it for you. And are you shopping anywhere? Change the color of your hair. Are you busy? And did you have to pay that fine that you've been dodging all the time? Are you still dizzy? Oh, yeah. Since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Oh, stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over there? Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water and I think of all the things what you're doing. In my head I paint a picture. Since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, babe?